ultimate kiosk, and he's going to be talking about, we heard about engagement, we heard about content. He's really going to be talking about how do you take a technology that solves a problem for a specific disease or entity and sort of get people to start using it, and how you can do that successfully.
Thanks, Remy. This is about hearing, and often people don't hear me, so if that's the case, tell me to speak up. Terry Mactaggart, Canadian, a house roof. I'll say some of that, probably. Technology developed over several years, best of breed, hearing testing, assessment, that's the key, reporting, coaching, streaming, relating to others, that kind of thing. Mobilized on a variety of devices, kiosks and other devices. I want to talk a little bit about why this whole industry and process is very curious. That's the title of the talk, The Curious Case of Hearing. But before that, I wanted to ask a question. How many of you know your audio profile? So, 1, 2. So that's about a 4% response rate. And that's not atypical. We talk here of self-tracking, clearly. Stanford BedX, all about self-tracking in part. You know, I know my blood pressure most days. Some days I certainly know my weight. A little less, that's good. I know my height, vertically challenged, declining. I know a little bit about my cholesterol. I don't understand what it means, but I know a little bit about it, and so on. And you will as well. But we don't know about our hearing. That's curious. That's very, very curious. Hearing is an industry of about $14 billion. It is dominated by 6 players, 6 large international players. The condition is a chronic condition, and it's one that is experienced by most people as they age in particular, but not entirely. Certainly people over 40, not over 65 or 70, and children under 14, clearly. The cohort of those affected is very, very substantial. And one of the reasons is this elusive audiogram thing. What is an audiogram? Audiogram's a chart. If you look at the y-axis, it increases as you go down toward the intersection point. Louder, more dB. If you look at the x-axis, it's frequency of sound, pitch, call it. And this is a very typical pattern in an audiogram. I've got one like this. Many of you in the room will start having something like this. Perhaps you have just this one in itself. What it basically says is that when you get into a speech range, in here, you need to be louder to hear. And therein lies the problem of sensory neural hearing loss, which typically we experience, particularly as we age, but not entirely. Kids are affected clearly more and more simply because of, you know what, the things they stick in their ears and the ramping up of the devices and so on they use. So they have this industry. It's not large, $14 billion worldwide, et cetera. The demographics are very favorable. We're all aging. We all know that. You'd think that the marketplace would just be expanding. The problem with the industry is it's not growing. It hasn't for years. Maybe inflation a little bit more, but not substantially. So despite these favorable demographics and growing concerns about lifestyle, we're all concerned about that clearly, the industry really isn't thriving. In fact, it has an enormous problem. And the problem is simple. Arguably, somewhere between 20 and 25% of those affected by this sort of thing are treated. Almost 80%. 80% are untreated. And that's, as a minimum, curious. And you ask why? Well, we know in many cases why. I mean, denial is part of it. Stigma, I'm going old, I don't want those clunky things in my ear, which isn't the case these years, certainly. Access is a big, big problem. We're called patients. We aren't really patients. It's kind of a consumer electronics thing more than a medical device thing in many cases. Some cases we're put off by cost, some cases by tactics of people in the channel, and innovation generally has been sluggish because the industry has been profitable. Margins are very, very high. If you've ever priced your family or yourself a hearing aid, they're very significant. $2,000, $3,000 a device, $4,000 a device. I've heard them as high as $6,000 a device. So part of the issue here is really what we call the journey. See if I can just pull this up now. Oh, go back. I don't know if this is going to work. I guess maybe it isn't. Let me tell you about the journey. That's supposed to result in a sparkle video. It's not picking up. I'll take my case. I know I have a hearing loss. Some of you will know you have a hearing loss. I'm puzzled about it. It's not getting any better. It's evident in a variety of circumstances, professional, personal, and so on. I don't really know what to do with it. I'm bombarded by traditional advertising, newspapers, in some cases TV ads, radio ads, that kind of thing, saying, we can help. I get to the point, partly because of my loving spouse, who insists that I don't hear that well, where I'm going to go and check something out, and I go and finally check it out. It probably takes 2 or 3 or 4 years, or perhaps longer. We may go together, and we go to a hearing instrument dispenser, hearing aid dispenser, and we have an evaluation, and it confirms what appears to be the case. And then we talk about product and service, and I learn the cost of these things, and there's sticker shock, incredible sticker shock. And that in turn leads to, oh my God, I don't want to spend $6,000 in these things. And, you know, they're a little clunky, certainly. And that gets me into a loop, kind of an endless loop of what do I do about this, and further delay. And ultimately, I may end up doing something about it. But the curious part of this is that typically takes, if you ever do it, and most don't, 7 to 10 years. The journey is on average about 9 years long. How many people are affected? Arguably a little under 500 million worldwide. If you take Canada and the United States, it's about 50 million. This is a chronic condition, partly medical, greatly lifestyle. 50 million people untreated, not semi-treated, untreated. Begs the question of, do we have a major chronic health problem? And the answer is obviously yes, although we don't understand that really. It's not current, it's not topical. And the follow-up, of course, to that is what might we do about it? Well, one thing we can do about it is take a page out of the Stanford lexicon here. Those of you who know this university know they have a sort of a mascot. It's called a tree. And their T-shirts you wear around here said, "Fear the tree." Well, this is a representation of the tree. You can use it in golf and so on. I'm going to put them right here. And I'm going to rename them and rebrand the tree. This tree is the Terry tree. I'm Terry. My wife is also Terry, so he's sort of unisex. He unisex sort of thing. And it's going to be called Don't Fear the Hearing Health Tree. He's going to sit right there for the next 4, 5, 6 minutes until I finish. I get it. But what might you do about it goes something like this. This is where our business is rooted. And there's a bunch of what ifs. What if we could figure out a way to demystify and destigmatize hearing health? What if we could promote early diagnosis and treatment? Why don't we talk about the best we can be instead of loss, being a patient? Why not talk about lifestyle, maximizing our enjoyment? What if we could collaborate with others to provide a solution that is basically rooted in awareness? And finally, what if we could facilitate a much easier access to what's required to understand what's going on in your hearing function and and what you might do about it given certain circumstances. And if that was possible through a technology, and it was made available in trusted locations, family physician offices, for example, and pharmacies, particularly community pharmacies, perhaps optical chains and so on, places we frequent and tend to trust, what will we have? Well, we'd likely have what we call a hearing health awareness program, HAP. One of the things we do, and it's really, really important in using this technology in a family physician office, for example, is something very simple in medical terms. It's a triage. What we do is triage, say, 1,000 patients over 40. Children are a little different, but not too different, actually. So we start with 1,000 patients over 40. No particular disease states. They'll have them, certainly. We find, typically, that 500 have hearing problems of various sorts. This technology can triage them into what's called conductive, which are somewhat fixable, they're medical issues, and sensory neural, the kind I have, my wife keeps telling me, which is permanent. And from there, there's action steps that can be taken. That's at the core of the program, hearing triage. Strange thing is that it's never really been encountered that way. It's not in the literature. Doctors aren't taught that way. 3 or 4 hours of training they have in their particular practice and so on. So what we've done is basically take this technology on various platforms and put it into trusted locations and encourage, through a model that works for everyone, testing and assessment and counseling and action. And under the Hearing Health Awareness Program, family physicians and pharmacies so far, everyone basically wins. The family physician, for example, who uses it, can bill for diagnosis. The test we provide and the evaluation we provide, coupled with examination of the ear, coupled with a history, is billable in many jurisdictions, certainly the one we're operating in most at this point. Each location is partnered with a hearing health professional who can look after more advanced evaluation and, where appropriate, instrumentation and so on, the partner dispenser. We have a sponsoring manufacturer. The sponsoring manufacturer really guarantees that the dispenser is going to pay us for that particular privilege of partnering, cover the cost of the technology, deployment, et cetera, monthly. So it's recurrent revenue. We have an organization that calls frequently on family physician offices, actually every 6 weeks. That's critical because you have to keep nurturing the relationships really that exist in this particular place. And of course, the benefit for us is the recurrent revenue and so on. Essentially, this program, and it's very different than what's been employed before, we think, in certain kiosks and pharmacies and so on, is that it's a win-win-win-win. The physician expands his or her service. It's a new revenue source. The partner dispenser has more referrals. That will result in some cases with more sales. The sponsoring manufacturer is happy because, for the same reason. The HAP marketer provides a new service as well and benefits from the revenue flow. And of course, we have a business that's sustainable and doing good work, basically. So that's working. It's early days still. There are some challenges, certainly. It's essentially all about partnering. The technology is important, it's fundamental, but it's insufficient. 20% or so of the success of this is based on an efficacious technology. What's really critical, and this is where the secret sauce lies, is in the relationship management. Really, really important. Issues here really involve how to deploy it elsewhere. We're looking very hard at California and Florida for obvious reasons. We have enough prototyping and testing and so on to know that it works, the model's effective. We're considered to be, by manufacturers who sort of hear about it, and dispensary channels and so on, perhaps the most important innovation of the last 20 years. It's very curious. I mean, it's pretty obvious. But that's the kind of feedback that we're getting. One of the reasons we're here is that that's not quite the end of the story. Deployment of networks, although that's important. So there's another what if. What if further deployment of this could engage the MedX mindset and capability. What if we could enable those with hearing loss and equal to or greater than importance, their influence, their families? If there's 50 million people affected in Canada and the United States, there's about 200 million that are in that sociogram. Those affected, family members, friends, business associates, and so on. We all have a hearing story, everyone. I've yet to find a person that doesn't, maybe directly or certainly through the network of people they know and in many cases love. How could we create a valuable and valued learning community? 3 or 4 or 5 years into this at Stanford. That's what this is all about. E-patientry, many cases beginning to get on steroids. And how can we motivate those with this sort of loss to behave like consumers, not patients? Hell, I play hockey. I'm not a patient. I need some help, though. Aldi? I want to be, into this consumer electronics thing. I don't want to be in a medical device, clunky thing. It's quite a different mindset that the industry is not really gone with. And that's a problem. So where we're at now is really an extension of what we're doing. We wish to further deploy these networks. We own the footprint. We can cut out the inefficiencies to a considerable extent. It's not easy because of the relationship management thing. And we wish to move into the enabling business. We think that makes sense. There's the largest chronic condition that has a health relationship in North America. The largest untreated cohort in North America. More than cardiac, more than diabetes, and so on, because a larger proportion of those are treated. This is untreated. And that's really what we're about and why we're here in large measure. We think over the last few days and an earlier conference I was at that we have a platform identified. We have partners that are beginning to come into view. And hopefully over the next year or so, we can begin to work on both the extension of the network and also the enabling part, the learning community part, which we think is fundamental. Thank you.